I'm ready to call the, May Finance and Operations Committee meeting together. And as we start, I will just say that we have student representatives Marta Dean from Crookston and Austin from the Twin Cities, Austin Craft from Twin Cities campus joining us here. So thank you for joining us and being part of our conversation today. It's my understanding, as you all know, that 4 of our colleagues, as of probably 20 minutes ago, are no longer regents, and we have 4 new regents selected, and I don't know for sure if any will join us. If they do, we'll welcome at that time. Just from my own point of view, it's kind of melancholy to see Regent Johnson, Regent Cohen, Regent Lucas, and Regent Omari not at the table with us. So best of luck to them wherever they go. It's they're all good people, all good friends of mine. So we are going to get started with our annual report on workforce and total compensation. This is a much awaited and somewhat delayed report, but now you have our full attention, Vice President Brown.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, and Senior Vice President Burnett. We are pleased to be able to present today on the university's workforce and total compensation. This is a discussion item. There are no action pieces to it. We will provide a light brush on information that is intended to give you a high overview, and it could be explored more deeply in many different ways, and so we will have a question and answer time that you can ask things that are of interest to you. In the docket materials today are also the report on employee compensation at page 5, the report on faculty compensation at page 54, and the report on senior leader compensation at page 73. Those are republished from the February docket meeting, so there is not new material in those reports. They are the same as had been published in February for your convenience. The university priorities really drive workforce planning and compensation considerations. The whole purpose of total compensation is to recruit and retain talent that we need to accomplish our strategic priorities. This illustration shows that, and our total comp plan actually follows from those strategic priorities. And finally, it is grounded in the university budget, which is what we can pay. You may have several ideas about what you'd like to pay, but ultimately we need to assure that our budget has those resources available. We want to talk just a moment about the workforce, and these next 3 slides are designed to give a big picture understanding of our workforce. Headcount is shown in the upper left. Age distribution is stable and largely expected. That's in the upper right. Our leadership and faculty are a mature, experienced workforce, which generally results in a higher level of compensation. In the lower left, you'll see we've had steady increases in diversity. A vast majority of our faculty and staff are focused on a mission and mission support. The leadership oversight headcount is about 7%, has remained stable for some period of time. Our second slide is about workforce flow. The upper left chart shows that we hire many people externally, which means that we are competing for talent in the open market and why we must be aware of what that open market pays. There are 2 areas that are highlighted for further analysis on these slide decks. On the upper right, the turnover rate in the first year of employment shows that it's high. So something we would want to continue to look at as we go forward is, why is that high? Are there activities we might undertake to try to make sure people are getting off to a good start and they're staying for that year too? Or are we making hires that aren't lasting because they don't have the right skill sets, in which we would need to look at our hiring process? So some work to do as we go forward. The need for succession planning on the lower half shows up given the number in the retirement zone. Succession planning in this public sector environment is really about developing high potential individuals so they are prepared to apply for leadership openings as they become available. Since we are an equal opportunity employer, we must post our positions and allow competitive applicants. We should, however, also plan that we have strong internal applicants for each of these positions. Our third dashboard talks about workforce cost. While the head count has gone up slightly, the percent of the total budget spent on our total labor cost has remained very steady, approximately 61% over many years. The lower right picture shows how our wage increases have compared to standard measures. And finally, I'd like to share with the board that we are putting together a number of reports in the Office of Human Resources to really help management in their decision-making process. HR analytics are very important. We continue to build and develop these. We are training managers and supervisors on how to use this information in their decision-making. I have been meeting with deans and all the vice presidents to demonstrate these dashboards, to talk about how they can be useful to them. All of these reports can be drilled down to a local departmental level, so they can be very useful. We are working on a executive dashboard that would be headcount, compensation, and I-9 compliance, so that those important statistics are right at the fingertips. Recruiting and retaining talent is driven by the university's employee value proposition. We've shown you this before. It illustrates some of the key components in the Regents policy on employee recruitment and retention. The circled items are the focus of the presentation today, so base pay, merit increases, and benefits. The true differentiator for the university from other employers is our mission. Our employees take great pride in our mission and often choose to stay at the university despite other more lucrative job opportunities. A second Regents policy that is important is the compensation policy, and we've taken out a segment of that for your convenience. Our total compensation approach is comprehensive and market-based. There are 4 components: compensation, health benefits, welfare and voluntary benefits, and retirement. And we'll talk just a little bit about each of these in our presentation today. In the compensation area, there are 2 lenses that we really use to appraise compensation. We look to what we can afford and how much do we want to pay, or how much is necessary to pay to retain top quality talent. Over the last several years, we have really worked hard to ensure that we have the elements of an effective compensation plan in place. We have a pay philosophy, which is established by our board policy. We have a strategy. We have pay ranges. We have policies and processes. And we've worked very hard to simplify policies and processes to more effectively and efficiently administer compensation. These foundational tools are now in place to allow future compensation planning. When we look at the market, this is a chart that really provides you with some excellent information on where we are operating in the current timeline. We are in the yellow box, which is somewhere between the 40th and 60th percentile. We do occasionally have an employee in the 90th percentile. That is usually not by design that we're trying to be there, but is the exception, not the rule, where we may have found an exceptional candidate that we think contributes to our university, we want to retain them, and we pay a higher rate because we think their contributions will be significant. To determine the relevant market value, we really look at two things. Where are we hiring from, and where do departing employees go? Here's some examples of relevant geographic markets. Many of our markets are the Twin Cities metro area. Certainly for faculty, we have international markets. For leadership positions, we have national markets in higher education. And when we look at the market, again, we're looking at where do we hire from and where do employees go. So in the senior leader market, just to demonstrate that it's a national market, we, in the last couple of years, have had a senior leader leave for the NCAA to be the VP for HR and equity and diversity. We've had a student affairs officer leave for Illinois to be the chief student affairs officer there. We've had an OIT professional leave to be the chief information officer at the University of Chicago. And we've had one of our compliance officers, second to Boyd Coomer, to leave to be the chief compliance officer at St. Louis University. So we are operating in a national market for many of our people, international for our faculty, and for most of our people, the Twin Cities metro area, some of them the upper Midwest, depending on the job. So the job family work helps us manage to a relevant market. Remember, we have several employee groups set forth in Regent policy, including faculty, graduate assistants, professionals in training, our labor represented employees, and students that are not covered by the job families. And they do not need to be because the title of the employee group describes what they do. For our professional and administrative staff and our civil service staff, the job employee group or the employee group doesn't really describe what their work is. So in those two employee groups, we divide it down into 20 job families that better describe the work that we do. Whenever you're managing your workforce, it's very important to know exactly what work the employees are doing. That's how we set the markets. And we also use something called a compa ratio, with 1 being the market median. And then above that would be, we would be above the median in what we're paying people. If it's below 1.0, we are below the market median. In every one of these job families and job classifications within a job family, we are likely to have some people above and some people below. So we look at averages to see if we're on target, if we're close to the median, and therefore helps us determine if we are competitive in the marketplace. Those variations often are based on employees' mastery of their work, their educational experience, their skill level that they bring to the job. Those factors all would warrant higher or lower pay. Just to give you an example, when we initially did the job family, we used broad categories. And the idea was that that was a good starting place to lay a foundation for this work. So notice the circled red number, which is a supervisor 2 or a pro 2 in the HR job family, and that's the midpoint of the range for that particular job classification. The next slide demonstrates the additional work we've done to refine that market. So if you go to the circled red number again, which is the supervisor 2 or pro 2 in the human resource job family, you'll see to the right several different lanes: benefits, compensation, call center, generalist, learning and talent development, payroll, talent acquisition, training. And we have refined those job markets because even in a broad market, there are specialists within those, and you will see different median pay ranges. This allows us to really even be more specific in what we pay people. So we're actually paying the appropriate value for the work we're receiving from individuals. And we're doing this for all of the job families. We are about 3 or 4 into that work right now, and we'll continue that work over time to move this forward. The Market Refinement Project improves our ability to carry out the 3 key human resource functions: to recruit and retain HR talent by paying them appropriately, to better understand our workforce and what they're doing, and finally, to strategically manage our salary budget so that we know where we're spending our money and whether that's getting the most, bang for our buck, so to speak. Now I will turn this over to Senior Director Ken Horstman to discuss the benefits portion of total compensation.
Thank you, Vice President Brown. Benefits are a key part of total compensation and often can be deciding factors in whether a candidate makes a decision to join the university or once here to stay with the university. And as with many employers, as you can see from our fringe group presented on this slide, the 2 biggest components of total benefits outlay are the medical benefit and the retirement benefit. To meet the objectives set out by the Board of Regents for health and retirement benefits, we do focus on 3 areas. First, we focus on compliance through contracting and our negotiation process, use of internal and external audits of our benefit programs, and maintaining accurate plan documents. That is, we do in practice what we say we do in writing. Second, we manage costs while ensuring quality of programs and customer service, the care and education for employees, retirees, and their families. And third, we focus on sustaining the value of these benefit offerings year over year without great volatility. The university's benefit allocations are in line with other local large employers of our size and scope. As part of our diligence, we formally benchmark our benefits against peer institutions and large local employers. And this slide reflects the percentage of total benefits spent by the university and by local employers to a particular benefit, comparing the University of Minnesota allocation to 16 large and jumbo employers in the state of Minnesota. Overall, the allocation of our benefits is in line with what is offered by other employers in Minnesota. Our current state of our university health benefits are that we are self-insured. Our programs are market competitive and meet the objectives of the Regents policy on employee health benefits. The U-Plan history reflects a plan that is managed well in regard to cost and member support. Currently, the health plan has network and well-being focused strategies, providing incentives for enrollment in the most efficient networks and for improvement and maintenance of personal well-being. The U-Plan does compare favorably to national benchmarks on efficiency. One method of comparing the efficiency and cost effectiveness of our health plan is to adjust the average cost per employee per year on a national benchmark for a peer group such as national higher ed and public sector employers for factors such as age, gender, dependence, geography, and the value of the plan in order to get a like comparison to our own health plan. When we do this, we typically see that our plan is highly efficient compared to the market, and this efficiency can translate into significant cost avoidance. Building on that, the efficiency benchmark can be backed up by the actual comparison of our U-Plan trend to year-over-year trend range we see nationally, as we are often in the lower segment of the national range or below it. We choose health strategies that provide value. Eliminating cost alone through cost shifting will not curb or reduce medical inflation. Rather, we propose programs such as those mentioned here that result in cost-effective care combined with a high level of quality. The University of Minnesota offers 2 mandatory retirement plans for employee groups: the Minnesota State Retirement System, or MSRS, through the state of Minnesota for our civil service and labor represented employees, and the Faculty Retirement Plan, or FRP, for faculty and P&A employees. Currently, the plan benefits provided by each mandatory plan are provided on this chart. Note that the FRP 401A plan is a defined contribution plan that provides a vested contribution to participants, which is subject to market risk with no guaranteed retirement income figure, while MSRS is a defined benefit that does provide a guaranteed benefit to the retiree. The faculty retirement plan is comparable to other R1 public institutions when comparing income replacement ratios. Replacement ratios provide a projected estimate of the percentage replacement of employee income while actively employed. These projections are based on assumptions of age, years of service, income, salary adjustments, and inflation. It is of value to determine a comparison to other employers. Universities A through J on this slide represent AAU R1 public institutions. The estimate is calculated periodically by our Office of Human Resources team based on an overview of the retirement plans at these institutions, and it does exclude Social Security benefits. Similarly, MSRS provides a summary of the replacement ratio for MSRS and contributions by public employer. This illustration shows that MSRS provides a significant guaranteed benefit at retirement outside the benefits of Social Security. To maximize the benefit of a very competitive retirement plan offering for participants across both plans, we execute on a number of strategies to support participants in realizing the value of this benefit, as well as the value of the additional personal savings through our voluntary plans. And some of these strategies are listed on this slide. The final point on this slide applies to all benefit programs. The most important value we can provide to employees, retirees, and their families is clear, concise, understandable, and actionable information on their benefit programs when they need it and how they like to receive it. This involves simplifying the complex and meeting the constant challenge of our changing demographics and technologies. And with that, I will turn it back to Vice President Braun.
At the end of the day, managing workforce cost goes back to the very first slide. What are our strategic priorities? How many people do we need to achieve those priorities? And setting appropriate compensation for them. So the key to managing cost is to really manage your workforce. The Office of Human Resources is supporting this in two critical ways. The first is we are working to increase management IQ through leadership development programs as well as supervisory training. We have online supervisory training available to all supervisors, and we are getting 600-700 participants for each training at its first offering, and then thereafter people can watch it again and again or for the first time on demand. The second thing we're doing is providing support to campuses, colleges, and units through consultation to support their organizational redesign to meet their goals and operate as effectively as possible. At this time, we welcome your questions, and we'll go from there.
Terrific, thank you. And there's a lot more information I know in our docket that we've looked at, but this is a nice overview, and hopefully some of the colleagues have looked at what's in there. Do we have anybody that would like to start off the questions? Regent Powell, I remember who you were for a second.
It's already been a long day.
Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters, for a very clear presentation and very well organized compensation data and approach. And so I just have really for this question sort of some technical questions. The first of which is I noted that it's been 6 or 7 years since we updated the survey data. I think it was mentioned that it was 2012 or 13, and I understand that we can estimate. But so really the question is, how often should we do at some point it becomes you don't want to build off a base that's too old. So I guess the first question is, how often should we do that, just to make sure that since that data is so critical and everything compares. That's the first question. And the second question has to do with the peer set. And I'm just wondering, so we use a national peer set, which includes, 20 or 25%, I think, of our West Coast. I mean, there are big cost of living differences. And so the question really is how we select the peer set. And I mean, at what point do you say, hey, we might be overweighted with, California institutions as an example. And again, the only reason I raise the point, I recognize is technical, because again, the peer set data is pretty it's critical. Everything bounces off of that. So so those are a couple of questions on the data.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Regent Powell, I'll take the last question first and defer the technical question to Ken. The peer group is actually one that is set by the Office of Institutional Research, and so we don't change that year to year to try to look for a particular outcome. That peer group is one that is primarily Big Ten institutions, and then there are some other top Research 1 institutions that we would normally compare ourselves to, such as the University of Washington, Florida, and so forth. So there are some coast schools involved, but it is far and away predominantly Midwestern schools. And we keep that the same to try to eliminate any deviations of the East Coast, West Coast variety. I'll defer to Ken on the technical question.
Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, and committee members. That is a good question on survey data. And when we finished the job family, that data was set at that time frame and aged. As we started approaching what to do next, the first thing that our current compensation team did when it came in was to build a list of surveys that we felt were relevant for our population. And over the last 3 years, what we have done is gone out and purchased those surveys on a cyclical basis. We likely do it every 2 to 3 years for each survey. And so we have a schedule that we're maintaining now. Many of the surveys you would recognize: Culpeper, Mercer, Willis Towers Watson, Gallagher, but there are also some that are higher ed based for certain disciplines. And so we agree wholeheartedly. We have a fairly rich data platform in that regard now, and we'll continue to update it and maintain it going forward.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
I'll pass for the moment if I could come back. I'm organizing some thoughts if there's anybody else.
Okay.
At the moment.
Is there Regent Wiggum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I probably should organize my.
I'll pass on that comment.
I'll get you later. Vice President, COMPA ratio, very interesting how it's developed and what you use there. And I enjoy numbers and what you can put into numbers and what you can show or not show by numbers. So let me understand the COMPA ratio. You take the salary, you divide it by the geographic salary within the area, the competitive geographic salary. I think that's what our value or our policy says in the state. And then you come up with a ratio, 1.8 or 1.08 or 0.92 or whatever. So would it be fair to say that in those positions we have here at the state that are not national, like a competition like President Kaler, or regional, like faculty, higher education, professors, that would be I would think the market would be certainly within higher education institutions for faculty. The other administrative positions that we might have would be compared to the geographic comparative rate of other public sector, like the state of Minnesota, Hennepin County, Dakota County. Would that be fair to say that that would be the midpoint of the salary range that we use as our divisor?
Vice President Brown.
Chairman Anderson, Regent Wiggum, yes and no. The way we determine the COMPA ratio is the median of the marketplace for a particular job, and That is from all the surveys that Ken has described. And then for our own, we add up if we have 20 people in a particular category, we divide that out, get the median, and then it's a one-to-one comparison, and it's either going to be one or above or below. So that's how we start. What we do to determine the market is where we recruit from and where people go. And the fact of the matter is the public agencies in our community are relevant, but not often the place where people come from to the U, and not where people go to from the U. So most of the time, I can point to my colleague beside me, he came from private industry. Out of my 6 senior directors, all have been in private industry positions. One came to us from the state of Minnesota. Patty Dion, I'm not sure where she came from. She's been here a long time. Now, I have to get her back every chance I can. So when we look where people come from, where they go to, that determines the market. I will say that the state of Minnesota, we occasionally have people from the state of Minnesota. We don't often have people that go to the state of Minnesota. We have very few job classifications where people would come to us from the counties, the local municipalities. Very rarely, too, that we would have people go to those. Oftentimes, people come to us from private industry. If they leave, they go to another private industry opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, I think, Vice President, you answered my own question, or what I was going to ask next in your response. I'm guessing that in the competitive regional or local market rate, those persons at the state or the county would love to come to the university. But the reason we don't lose them from the university is that we pay significantly higher salaries than we do at the state of Minnesota, or we do at Hennepin County. So it doesn't surprise me that they would love to come to the university, but we're not going to lose them back to the state of Minnesota. So, Vice President, for instance, let me just give you a for instance, and let me pick on auditor. She does a great job. She's wonderful. I don't want anybody to lose money in salary. I want people to be paid well, and I want folks here. But, if we're going to control any costs, folks, if we're going to control any costs at all, 61%, I think you said, goes to salary. You can only shut off so many lights. You can only cut down going to so many conferences. And sooner or later, you got to get to salary if you're going to save some costs at the university. It's either head count or it's the salary you pay. Taking the auditor, for instance, my guess is you take the auditor's salary and maybe 10 or 20 or 30 people under her in her department, and you divide it by a divisor of the legislative auditor or the state auditor or the auditor, I'm talking about the local competitive market now, or the Dakota County auditor, that number is well above 1.0, well above it. If you remember last year, I made a number of comparisons for this group from state positions to university positions. Now, I could have done chief of staffs. I could have done researchers. I could have done whatever. But I do not believe for a second that compa ratio uses a divisor of the local competitive market. I do not believe that. And in fact, you've answered that yourself when you said people come to the university from those areas. They don't go back to the state or to Hennepin County or to Dakota County. Mm-hmm. So, members, all I'm saying is, the bottom line, if we are going to do anything ever to control costs, which means tuition, Austin, or which means money from the state, it's either head count or it's salary. Otherwise, we're not going to control any costs here at the university. We've done the reallocations. We've done the President's Operation of Excellence to the tune of 90 million, I think, or someplace in there. And folks, it's a simple numbers game. I will leave it at that. I will leave it at that. And I've said my piece, so I feel good knowing that higher education is going to put itself on a little different pedestal than the rest of the public sector.
Vice President Brown, would you like to answer, or should we go to the next question?
I have a couple comments I think that might be
You're welcome.
relevant. So Chair Anderson, Regents Wiggum, there is a difference between public sector employers. We can look at police, for example. They are making more at the city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul than they are making here. So the broad statement that other public sector employers are making less than University of Minnesota employers doesn't prove out for every job classification. And it would be a very comprehensive review to try to sort that out. So I can't completely buy that all of the public sector employees out there are desperate to get here because they would make more money. I don't think that's absolutely accurate at all. The second thing I would say is that they're doing very different types of work at the state and other public sector employers. So it's not an apples and apples description. The things they do at the state, they have a Department of Natural Resources. They have all kinds of people that are doing work out in the streams and forests and lands of Minnesota. We don't really have that kind of position here. The environmental agency, we don't exactly have that kind of work here. There's a number of corrections. We don't have corrections folks here. There's a whole lot of categories in the public sector outside the university that aren't matches for what we do here. So it would be really looking at less than half of the story if we only looked at the state or we only looked at the counties and municipalities in our greater region here. They're just different types of businesses. They have different kinds of employees and they have different arrangements. So what we do is we look at what the work is and we look at the markets from which we hire. So I would say it's not always fair to say that somebody in the public sector in the state or county or municipality would want to come here. Their type of work may not be here, and frankly, their salary may be better in those locations than it would be at the university. So you have to make sure you're getting an apples to apples comparison, and that's what's hard about this kind of work. So the debate about what's the right market is an endless debate in this kind of work, whether you're in the private sector or whether you're in the public sector. How do you get that right market comparison? So what we have tried to do is use a blended market, which considers the public sector, but it also considers the private sector because we hire a lot of people from the private sector because that's where the workers are that do the kind of work that we need. So it's a combination. This debate could go on, endlessly because it's a debate in this profession that goes on endlessly. But what we have tried to do is structure something that we think makes sense, gives us a high-level overview so that we have a good gauge of whether we're reasonable or unreasonable. We know, for example, that IT professionals are in very high demand in everywhere, in the private sector and the public sector. And so by looking at both, we have a sense of what we would need to play to get top quality people in that area. Sometimes it's just getting a person in that area because that's a very tight market right now, less than, a couple of % unemployment. So getting good people is very challenging. It's an endless debate. It's a fair debate. What we're trying to do today is give you a good explanation of how we're looking at it. The final thing I would respond to, Regents Wiggum, is I think The real answer to reducing the 61%, if one would want to do that, and I'm not sure that one should want to do that, it's been very consistent over time, and you have to recall that part of the reason we're spending that much on people is that we have research. We get new research dollars in. That's keeping the number of people high. And we want those research dollars because that's the work that we do. As we get students, we have to have teachers. We have to have student professionals to support those students. So we want to have that number at an adequate amount to support the work we're trying to do. But if you wanted to reduce the 61%, probably reducing the head count is the best way to do it. Because once you start reducing the salaries and by dollars and cents, yes, that would reduce the cost, but reducing dollars and cents, if that compa ratio goes too low, then you're not going to get people who are applying at a private sector and applying here. There is some kind of a break point where somebody would say, I've got to go over here because as great as the university is, as much as I like its mission, I still have to pay for my mortgage and I need that extra 20, 30,000 that I'm going to get out of the private sector or the stock options or whatever. So I guess that's what I would comment on the ability to reduce the 61%.
Final point of your answer, if I just may interject.
Yes.
Makes the point that quality counts.
Yes.
Quality counts. So Regents Wiggum, I think, has
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
a rebuttal maybe or a
Vice
comment.
President Brown, with all due respect, you miss it completely. I don't want to reduce the 61%. I want to reduce or hold the line on the 100%, not on the 61%. We appropriately put 61% to staff to compensate our good staffs and our faculty. That's I got no problem with that. That's right. It's the 100%, the full package of what we spend here that we then put to tuition or we put to other costs that concerns me and that I think we have to hold the line on. And I don't even want to reduce it. I just like to, hold the line on the increase a little bit sometimes, Vice President Brown. And to mention, a DNR employee, of course we don't have that here necessarily at the university, but to me, and I'm sure I'm a hayseed farmer from Kenyon, but auditing is auditing, whether you're at the legislative auditor's office, the state auditor's office, or the auditor at the university. Chief of staff is chief of staff, whether you're chief of staff for the governor, you're chief of staff for the president. You can go right down the line, research, law work, attorney general. Law work is the same in the attorney general's office as it is in the legal office here at the university. Now, there are some comparisons that are a lot closer than what you allude to, I think, Vice President Brown. Again, I've said my piece, folks, but I think that.
And Vice President Brown did say this is a good discussion to have, and it's tough discussions. I think you both make valid points. We are going to move on because some other regions do want to talk. Regent Beeson, are you ready yet?
Finally ready. My colleague gave me more to think about.
I wish you'd been ready earlier.
I wasn't, but Regents again, Wiggum and I have talked. We've debated this point, and we do disagree. I view the issue as, in terms of our employees, is that they have choices to go to work anywhere in the state, and the state government's only maybe 2% of the whole sort of workforce of the state. So we have to price these salaries at levels that maybe are not quite the private sector, but they're going to be more than the state of Minnesota. So because the people I see leave here, it's not a one-way street down University Avenue to the Capitol. It's going to the public sector. It's going to the nonprofit sector, or it's going to business. So, I agree. There are some jobs that are completely comparable, but I would rather pay to keep good employees and prevent them from leaving to the public sector. Second point I was going to make, and Regent Powell covered this. I think the data does need to be updated more than every 6 or 7 years. You have to be religious about it every 2 or 3 years. And then third point is, you created the job families, and that's really helped with the benchmarking study that we've done. But so you have systems and you have data in place. I think the data now is better. We have better data now to revisit the progress card. Because our job is at a macro level, look at the progress card and look at where we can be more efficient. We're going to go to a topic right after this, which deals with a sort of 11th hour deal that we made last year about employee headcount. Well, that hasn't worked out. We need to take a more strategic approach to efficiency. We know we have to replace operational excellence. That's going to be a whole new initiative. It needs to show up in the progress card, and your data is going to be key to that, because this has to be data driven. You have all the data about compensation, about employee headcount. You can slice and dice it in ways. We didn't have this when we started 6 years ago. You did not have data. We did not have the data, but we now have the data, and we now need to apply it into some goals and objectives for us, and that has to be on the progress card. Regent Shu's nodding his head. I'll yield the rest of my time to him.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Beeson. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is a really good conversation. Just, as ours was this morning, as we start to, kind of look at some of these things anew in this strategic analysis. I would say that I was a little bit confused by the interplay between Regent Wiggum and Vice President Brown, because I think he was speaking in the general and it was refuted with the specific, and actually some of the specifics, as he pointed out, were kind of outliers. I don't want to take away from the fact that there is validity in what he's saying, and at least from the standpoint that we should know where those distinctions lie. And the fact that we're having this conversation where we're kind of talking past each other reflects the fact that there's some work to do here. For me, when I look at this, and again, with sort of a long view of these issues, by my experience, first, we have to get a handle on what our total compensation is. As my colleagues know from a few years ago, I expressed that I'm frustrated that sometimes it's like, well, sometimes we're comparing salaries, sometimes we're comparing benefits, and sometimes we're comparing both. And you really have to just come with that level set of what the comparative analysis is. And that's private versus public, public versus public. I think we can get there, and I believe you have the information. Maybe we haven't asked the right question, but we can, I think, get to that point. I'm always nervous about using subjective terms like quality, because I believe we have quality whether our employees are comparable to other publics, comparable to other privates, or well above. I mean, to throw that out there, and I don't want to end the conversation that way, because it prevents you from being able to actually have this analysis, because I'll throw out access. I'll throw out access and affordability. That's a subjective concept, and on an issue of this variety, I think our students should be saying, absolutely, we want quality, competent, effective people across the board, staff, faculty, you name it. But at the same time, I don't want to be paying student loans till I'm 55 years old. And so, it just really depends on which angle you take at this, where you say, well, what's our priority? Is our priority keeping accessible, affordable, public world-class education that the university provides, or is it solely focused on ensuring we don't lose a quality employee once in a while because we're running along that line of efficiency that we really have to be running on if we're going to be good stewards of these tuition and state dollars? So I want to make sure that we don't just, again, throw that out there and then all of a sudden we say, well, geez, of course, if we tighten the belt a little bit in some areas where certainly people outside the university perceive us as being quite generous, we're going to lose quality. I don't think that's true. I think that there obviously is a correlation, but we need to understand where that line is. This is my perspective as we engage in this conversation. When I served on the board eons ago, our employees were much closer to where state employees were. And I thought that they were wonderfully talented and very much a quality crew who did some really difficult things to bring the university to its remarkable position that it's in today. And so that's my bias. My bias is I have seen people who had good, solid compensation in a public environment, great benefits, lots of job satisfaction, serving the world as it was a public service as well as a career. So I have that bias that I've seen it I've seen it work really well, and I haven't been convinced that we can't operate in that world to some extent. That being said, as we go into this conversation, which I think we owe to the students and I think we owe to the state, as we pointed out, this is a huge percentage of what we spend, and if we're ever going to bend the curve for affordability and making other investments in new priorities for the university, it's got to be a slow process. It's got to be a respectful process. Obviously, the easy way is to address headcount, particularly as it relates to attrition and so on. The challenge with a high base when you start is people have expectations. They have expectations of raises. They have expectations of recognition of their good work. And obviously, if you went to your high, your folks with high compensation, even within their own categories, and say, well, we're freezing you for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to let the market catch up, you're going to have some dissatisfaction. You're going to have some folks that get frustrated. So that's why it's got to be a slow, respectful process to make sure as we conduct this analysis, we have a level set understanding of what the total compensation is. We know what the comparative grouping is, whether it's public or private, and then but that we do it in earnest to understand that over 20 years, the costs of higher education have grown in a way that I still, to this day, 4 years back on the board, can't explain. And so I look forward to that conversation, appreciate the work that you're doing, and appreciate the questions that my colleagues are asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. We're circling back to Regent Powell. Did you have another question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair Anderson. So maybe I'll shift us to a different aspect of this, but it'll show the same interest in looking for ways to become more efficient. And you touch on this at the very end of your presentation, and you commented on a little bit on restructuring. I think you talked about the opportunity perhaps for shared services, which I think you raised in your presentation. So I guess my question is, how do you assess our efforts around restructuring and the opportunity that we have in front of us to do that? Because I happen to agree with, I think Regent, whoever said it, that if our compensation is more or less in line, which not all of us would agree to, but I think it probably is, then that it does point you in the direction of structure as one important tool. And so how good are we at doing that, and how much of an opportunity is that? The second area is just all around process improvement, which you didn't touch on, but which is certainly, a hot topic in any organization around the Twin Cities or around the country, and I think can be a great place to go. And the last area is shared service. And, how much of an opportunity do we have to, relocate routine work from where it might be done here to someplace in South Dakota, whatever. And we all know how that works. And so can you maybe comment a bit on those opportunities, where we are in terms of going after them? I know that this is outside, if you will, strictly a compensation conversation, but it's certainly in the realm of human resources strategy.
Vice President Brown.
Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, thank you for the opportunity. What we continue to try to do through this report and really every day is provide tools for leaders and managers to do better, tools for you to understand where we are, and help in understanding the context in which we're operating, in which you allude to, Regent Powell, evolves and changes all the time. So what are we doing with that? Today's employment context is obviously very different than it was post-World War II when our civil service rules were put into place, or the 70s when our P&A rules were put into place. So what do we need to do with that? And I agree with you, this all requires some structural reevaluation. The work has changed. The technology changes how we do work. Some jobs we have today, we didn't even have 10 years ago, some not even 5 years ago. So that forces you to constantly evaluate what is the work, what are the skills needed to do that work, and what do we need to pay to have that done. So that should be an ongoing iterative process. Our office tries to support that. That also has a lot of change management to it. And I know you understand that's not always the easiest aspect to move things, is to help people understand the need for change. But we constantly try to have those conversations, and I think the work in that area goes in fits and starts. When there's pressure on it, things change. If there's not pressure, things drift a little bit. It's human nature for it to go that way. But I have seen a tremendous amount of change over the time I've been at the U, and in the last 5 years even, the tremendous amount of change. Processes have been improved. We did a lot of process improvement when we implemented the upgraded PeopleSoft tool in 2016. There was a lot of process improvement. We continue to do a lot of process improvement in the Office of Human Resources, and I know my colleagues are doing that as well. There's many examples of areas where we have saved money by improving the process or eliminating some things we no longer need to do. So I think we're, do we get an A grade on that? I don't know, we're B plus, probably at least. I mean, we're doing a lot of good things. And I think it's, there's a lot to be done, so we're making good progress. Shared services is a term that has no actual definition. I mean, if you look at all the literature, it's defined in many, many different ways. And I actually think, again, we're doing pretty darn well on sharing services. We do a lot of partnering with other units. We try to improve so we aren't duplicating services. And the big challenge is when we're a decentralized institution and a lot of decisions are made at a collegiate or unit level, how much do we combine those, or how much do we try to improve processes so they're done more efficiently at that level, and when they're closer to the work actually is done better. In the area of human resource data and quality, we're trying to move the dial from starting to everybody kind of did their own thing to here are the rules for doing it. Let us help you get better and better at it, and moving along that pathway so that data quality is improving and it's taking less people to do it at that local level. The next step is, do we need to combine that in one big center? I think we're still contemplating that. Is that the right answer or the wrong answer? I don't know at this moment in time. But I think in every area, not just human resources, but all of my colleagues are all looking at that continuum. How do we move that along? What's the right place on the continuum for this point in time? Where should we be looking down the road?
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Brown, thank you. And you made a comment there saying, thinking back on your time at the U. And thinking back on your time at the U, I know we're going to have a transition in human resources. Mm-hmm. So at least from this committee, I just want to thank you for your years of service to the University of Minnesota.
Thank you very much.
And I appreciate our discussions with you up here. You've always been frank and honest and gave us hard things to think about. And at least from me, that's very much appreciated. So best of luck. I think we're going to let you go as there's nobody else ready to talk to you today, but maybe we'll have you back here before you're finished with your career.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have next, we have in our position approval process update. I think Provost Hansen and Associate Vice President Tonneson and Budget Analyst Zwiers is going to be here, along with Senior Vice President Brian Burnett. And I'm guessing, Brian, did you want to tee this up, or do you want?
While they're getting
it ready?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Today we have a report for you that was mandated in last year's budget approval about the position process that was described earlier. We instituted a process at the board's direction, and we're going to go over the results of that today. There's a pretty thick report in the board docket, and we've tried to summarize it today. And we have some specific recommendations for you, but I think they'll lead with, this was the language that was added to the budget when it was adopted by the board last year. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Associate Vice President Tonneson and others that will be talking this through.
When you're ready, Vice President Tonneson.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson and members. I'm going to start us off today with really just a couple of points that set some context for the more detail and results information that Corinne will share with you here in a minute. I want to remind people, as the first point, that this analysis was focused on positions that are funded 100% with O&M, with state O&M appropriation and tuition only. So if positions are split funded between O&M and a grant, for example, they're not included in this analysis, and that will become clear, I think, as we speak. The second point is that what we have been looking at are changes from what the units have entered in this year's FY19 budget. So each year, departments are asked and actually required to estimate revenues by revenue type and enter that into the budget in our budget system. They are also required to enter expenditure information by specific type in the budget system. And when that comes to personnel, they estimate salary and fringe costs for each individual employee and enter that in the system for the most part, and each open position. So what we're looking at are changes to what was in the system. Given that, we asked units to do two things. First, we asked them to seek approval if they wanted to add a position on top of what was already in the approved budget. They had to seek approval from the provost and Senior Vice President Burnett. And then secondly, we asked them to report quarterly on changes to all the positions that are in that entered budget. That could be a position coming open, filling an open position from a subsequent quarter, or it could be eliminating a position. And for all of those actions, we asked them for estimates on cost savings and cost increases. So for that, that's just to set some context. I'm going to turn it over to Corinne Zuers, who is an analyst in the budget office. She did most of the analysis for this particular report and is very well suited to provide you to summarize for you the results and the details behind the report. So, Corinne.
Thank you. As we began designing the processes as Associate Vice President Tonneson described, we ran into several challenges, and most of those challenges relate to the decentralized nature of our finance and human resource functions, as you just discussed with Vice President Brown a few minutes ago. Budget planning, budget entry, hiring, and funding source decisions all occur at a decentralized unit level. And oftentimes the decisions are made actually at the departmental level and differ by RRC. Because of the decentralized process, we could not use a one-size-fits-all model when we were working with the units, nor could they use a one-size-fits-all model when they were working with their departments. Because of that, as well as the fact that our systems are designed to manage headcount as well as budget, rather than manage based on position, what we did is we utilized a series of spreadsheets in order to gather all of the information. And as you know, when you're managing via spreadsheet, there is always the potential for human error. Because the systems are not designed for position management, we also needed to establish a starting point for our work. So what we did is our office worked with each of the resource responsibility centers to establish baseline data for all of the positions budgeted 100% on operations and maintenance dollars. This included 9,358 positions with $696 million in salaries. RRCs then used this baseline data in order to determine if a position needed to go through the approval process, or if it was already a position on the list, if it would go through the quarterly turnover reporting process. In terms of the results, we had 81 requests for approval related to the positions, the position approval process. 79 positions were approved from July through March. And we analyzed those approvals in two different ways. One was based on request type. We split the approvals into two separate categories. One was based on when the decisions were made. Some of the decisions related to the hires in the approval process were actually made before July 1st, so before the fiscal year even started. Those were positions that were either already posted or well into the planning phases. And for many reasons, the positions just were not budgeted through the regular budgeting process. The remaining 42 positions, about half, were actually unit decisions made after the start of the fiscal year. And in many ways, these decisions are or represent new decisions to spend resources after the start of the fiscal year. We also looked at the approvals based on the cost benchmarking categories. 37 of the positions fell into the direct mission cost benchmarking category. They included researchers, professors, teaching professionals, and others delivering the mission. Approximately 46% of the approvals were in the mission support category. They included advisors, student service professionals, finance staff, program support staff, and other administrative staff. And then we had 6 positions that fell in the leadership and oversight category, including 3 managers, 2 supervisors, and 1 associate dean position. In total, the salary and fringe expenses associated with the 79 approvals were $4 million above budget. Units planned, one of the pieces of the request, we asked how they plan to fund the positions. And the positions and the spending was offset by salary savings from other personnel changes, or they were covered by revenues elsewhere in the budget. Examples include MinDrive funds, startup funds, medical discovery team funds, and other sources. When we look at the reporting process, we have results from July through December. During that time frame, there were 750 changes to individual positions. This included 191 positions that were newly open and not filled, 525 positions that became open and were subsequently filled, and then 34 positions that were eliminated. It is important to note that we also have pooled positions as a part of our budgeting process, and they are not included in this analysis. Pooled positions are budgeted as a single line for a group of individuals. A good example of a pooled position would be our custodial staff. We budget them as a pool, and it's a way for the units to manage their workforce. Facilities management on the Twin Cities campus, undergraduate education, the University of Minnesota Duluth, and the College of Science and Engineering here on the Twin Cities campus all utilize pooled positions in order to manage their workforce. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Associate Vice President Tonneson.
So before we move into some discussion about the report itself, just a couple of concluding thoughts. As Corinne mentioned, and as you read in the report, there was additional spending above budget for the newly approved positions, and the units identified the resources to pay for those additional costs. In addition to that, there were savings reported at this point in the process anyway from the turnover in the fall. But it's important to note with that turnover that that's a normal part of our annual budget cycle. Actually, some of our units depend every year on salary savings just to balance their budget and to address reallocations. We have units that are constantly, as Vice President Brown mentioned earlier, constantly evaluating personnel changes as they happen during the year, looking for opportunities to restructure what people do, which people do what work, and also for opportunities to save money. That happens constantly. It is actually, this whole process and what we verified here is our reallocation process in action. If a position comes open during the year, the unit will evaluate that position, make a determination whether it needs to be filled. If they determine not to fill it, that position actually becomes, in most cases, part of their response to the following year's budget cut or reallocation process. So they will eliminate that spending the second year from the budget. And in doing so, that's part of their reallocation response. This happens all the time. We actually count on it happening during the year as part of the regular management of the budget because they look at this over a period of years. It's not sort of one isolated month at a time. Because of that, we don't believe that this position approval and reporting process added to the savings from what it otherwise would have been even without the process. We do not believe the process led to additional savings. And because of that, primarily for that reason, but also because of the administrative burden that this process added to our office, but also throughout the university, and because it also created some incentives in some cases for units to split fund positions to avoid the process when they otherwise might not have done that. For those reasons, we are recommending that this process actually not continue past our reporting today. Instead, we would suggest that we work with the board to understand what kind of headcount and FTE information would be useful in your governance role. As Vice President Brown and her team just mentioned in the presentation prior to this, we have new capabilities in that area and a better ability to report information than we had in the past and to use that information differently and in a more efficient way than this particular position reporting process required. So that would be our recommendation. And with that, the four of us are available to answer questions about the report.
Thank you, Associate Vice President Tonneson. I think before we go to questions, I know some of my colleagues are ready. Senior Vice President Burnett wanted to chime in.
I just want to thank thank Corinne and Julie for all the work that they've done on this process, and members of the committee. We took this to heart and we put it into action, and we put a lot of administrative burden on the units. You're looking at 2/3 of the budget office of the entire University of Minnesota sitting with the provost. We have a 3-person budget office for $4 billion of spend. And that's one of the smallest ones I'm aware of in the peers that we work in. So one, I would just suggest to you, we understand the issues around headcount and what it means. I think we also have to balance that with what we're trying to accomplish from a mission and quality perspective, and the students and the expectations that both our students have, our faculty have, and the state has for the research productivity of this university. So we're happy to take your questions. But I wanted you just to point out this was a pretty big burden on a pretty small office on top of everything else they have to do, keeping track of the budget and reporting to the state, getting our state requests together and everything else.
Thank you. I think we'll start with Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. You know, it feels like we put you through a fire drill here with this. And as I mentioned in my previous comments, this idea was well-intentioned, but it really hadn't been vetted. And trying to apply something that's, was only talked about over a matter of days into this kind of institution, I think was fairly risky. But having said that, this might be, I would suggest, again, we step way back and think about what the successor program is going to be to operational excellence. President Designate's talked about that, and this is going to fall on you, Mr. Burnett, about giving us 3 or 4 different sort of macro options. Regent Powell's mentioned shared services or centralization. Regent Wiggum's really focused on headcount, but there's spans and layers. There's other ways to do it, but we have to take it at a really macro level. You're going to have to flesh out what those are, and then let us choose which area that we. But it's got to be. We've got to be strategic about it. It's going to take a while to do this really well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Regent Beeson has nicely captured a whole lot of my perspective. I would want to build on and perhaps reinvent and launch anew a operational excellence approach to this. So to me, that's where to start. I didn't weigh in earlier on what I'll call the Wiggum continuum from market-based salary, looking at ways to deal with cost cutting, to head count. I tend to land over here on the head count side closer because I don't think we can ever agree on a relevant marketplace by which to do salaries. Just sitting around the table today with only 8 regents here, there's a pretty significant and diverse set of opinions on that. So I land over on that side in terms of tools, but I'm looking at your concluding thoughts here and appreciate the sense I'm gathering from all of you that you did, despite resource constraints and everything else that Vice President Burnett has raised, you've tried to use this as a learning process, and you've got some thoughtful feedback for us here. So, there's a lot packed into that item one, but, dollars is the other way we do it, and then you figure out what the right mix of headcount and salary is, and that matches up nicely with my governance perspective as well, which is not to try to get too far under the hood, but give you the parameters that we think you need to operate within and then move forward. So I guess my point is just this: I'm weighing in on the headcount versus salary thing, but not too heavily, and that I'll take your item one to heart, and as we look for round two or the next iteration of operational excellence, that's going to have to come to bear. So.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. Regent Wiggum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I sincerely apologize to the three of you and to Vice President Burnett for creating a bureaucratic nightmare mess for you. I apologize. I will blame McMillan and Powell and Rocha for voting for my damn amendment.
Responsibility accepted.
Just kidding.
I want to check the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
But seriously, I did not expect it to be the bureaucratic mess it turned out to be. I just wanted something as simple as saying, we got thousands of people that are retiring, O&M funded positions, administrative positions every year. What's the consequence of not filling this position for this school? Just something simple like that. And it got to be, you voted for it too, Simonson, so I blame Randy too. But I do apologize for that, and do it sincerely with a little joke to my friends over there. Again, the bottom line, if we are going to control any spending, if we are going to control 61% goes to personnel, we have significant numbers of persons who retire, move on, attrition every year. We can do it in a very, very pure, in a very prudent way, not telling anybody they don't have a job, but maybe not filling positions. And the intent was very, very, very pure. I think the strategy of trying to control costs either through headcount or salary, it's in the ballpark. It's in the ballpark. The execution didn't work. Mm-hmm. And to that, I feel bad, and I do apologize. But I think in working and speaking with Vice President Burnett, as we move ahead next year, maybe even in the budget in June, we might find some type of measures, some type of mechanism, some type of something we can initiate in a program to help us address this in a more efficient and a more responsible way than the amendment you voted for, Rocha.
Regent Wiggum, I'll just take a minute and just tell you, 1 second. I don't think you really need to apologize for this. The old saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I sat in on a discussion with Vice President Tonneson and Senior Vice President Burnett, and we learned some things from this on even how the reallocation goes on daily. I mean, that was somewhat news to me. We talked about how somebody leaves and Associate Vice President Tonneson says, well, they kind of hold that money because they don't know how much the president's going to ask them to reallocate next year. And if they don't need to hire that position, that can be money they used in their reallocation. So I would not apologize for it. It didn't work out, but we learned some things. And if we're going to get better at what we do, we need to learn some things. So I know, Vice President Burnett, did you still want to speak?
If I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Regent Wiggum, absolutely. What I would say is I think we can bring something that's much less burdensome administratively, but still gives visibility to the board about where the headcount changes are occurring and by what RRC, or Resource Responsibility Center, which are our colleges and campuses, and in what area. Because as we've talked about, with the advent of mHealth and the money coming from Fairview, we're going to be adding a lot of researchers to this university. And you know what? You should see that. You should see that. And we should be showing that to you, that we're putting the Fairview money to work, right? So I think that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but what we're going to bring you is, and talk with you beforehand, is part of the president's budget recommendation in June is some reporting to Vice President Brown's point that would give greater visibility without the administrative burden, that would give you some more feeling of comfort about how we're, as a group of leaders, managing this institution and trying to make it as cost-effective as possible. So you have our attention. I think we have a way to get there that meets your needs and doesn't put this administrative burden on the institution and our budget office.
Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters. I find this very interesting. I'm in the private animal health business. I've got a major partner in it. And we come at this stuff from different angles. He's always looking at how do you control costs? I'm looking at how do I raise revenue? And I've kind of brought that thinking to the Board of Regents in my focus, raising revenue other than tuition, that kind of thing. So it's a balancing thing, but at the same time, controlling costs is important, and it's obviously something that the legislature looks at very closely. And so my question is pretty simple. We voted this morning on some new majors in some different colleges. I think we voted on that. I recently read the president has done some reorganization of academic health and moved the dean of the vet school to another position, so another dean's coming in there. Costs. Is that information looked at, and is that available, and how does that affect the budgets on those simple things like that? That's the first thing I thought about. Okay, what's the cost on those two things?
I think Julie can answer that.
I don't think you're looking for an answer on a cost of.
Cost of having these new majors or programs in these colleges.
Oh, okay.
There's going to be administrative costs, there's going to be
Right.
other costs associated with it.
So you had a rhetorical question there, because I don't think these people are ready to answer that question on those
That's something we
programs.
should have available.
Well, if I can, Mr. Chairman, Regent Simonson, I think Provost Hanson would be the best one to answer on the programs, but I will tell you on the Academic Health Center restructuring, there is no cost added for what we've done. I mean, we've tracked all the money all over, and we would never have done a restructuring to add costs. Quite frankly, we were looking for other ways to reduce costs. And so we did track all the money, but the Academic Health Center restructuring has no additional dollars in it.
Well, that's good. It was can I say one more comment? But we're going to need a new dean at the veterinary college. So I assume that was factored in?
Yes, Chair, yes, it was.
Well,
And maybe let.
you want to take a swing at new programs and how they're cost, or if that's through new tuition or whatever, how they're funded?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. And yes, that both of these actually, because in each case when we have a program, we actually try to report whether or not we're reconfiguring courses we have. In general, we're not adding any costs at all. We're either, lots of times we're dropping some configuration of the courses, but the costs would come when we'd add faculty. And in general, for these programs, we're not adding any faculty at all. And then with respect to the restructuring, it was a condition that the president laid down on the restructuring that we would not add costs. You're quite right that we have moved the responsibilities of one of the collegiate deans over into this organization, but his salary will be paid out of the funds that were in the AHC before, and his salary in veterinary medicine will remain with veterinary medicine.
President Kaler.
President Kaler, did you want to take a swing at it too? Since we're playing baseball?
I'm tempted to just lean on my bat, but I will take a swing at it. Some of the dialogue here is difficult to hear. You really should, as a governing board, understand that we understand the need to control costs. And your job is to push and prod us and ask hard questions like you're doing. But you really ought to have a comfort level that we're not going to reorganize the AHC and increase costs. We're not going to add new majors unless we have a revenue source of additional enrollments that we expect to fill them. And that's down the line after it proves itself with existing faculty. We really do keep a tight eye on what goes on here.
Thank you, President Kaler. We're going to move on to Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. So I just want to, I think, endorse what Regent Beeson said and President Kaler just said. And I voted for Regent Swigum's, that motion. I thought it was brilliant at the time, but I did vote for it. But I think we'll be happier if we figure out how to operate at a higher level. And I think that does involve Senior Vice President Burnett in developing whatever it is, 4 or 6 year financial plans where the administration is going to go on the hook for 15 or 18 or whatever it is, process excellence commitments every year, and we have to leave it to a large extent up to you to come to us and tell us, here's how we're going to do that. Because when we get into this level of detail, we're not very happy.
Thank you, Regent Powell. And we're going to wind up with Regent Beeson here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent Simonson and I think are cut from the same cloth, that we've both run businesses where we've understood that we have to raise the top line to cover inevitable costs on the expense side. And most businesses that survive nowadays have got to spend the time on the revenue. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this place getting bigger. We don't want it to be all on the backs of the state. But when we go into the new planning mode for operational excellence, we need to spend as much time on revenue enhancement as we do on costs. So let's have a parallel conversation around that, and everything's fair game, just like it should be on the expense side.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. And you were going to be our last hitter, but Regent Hsu was asked to back cleanup. So Regent Hsu.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify the record here. It was a unanimous decision to continue this, and it was or not to start this process last year, and it was supported by President Kaler and the administration at the time. And I guess I would just add that, as we discussed this morning, enrollment is very important, because we have to, not only do we have to enroll enough students to kind of fill up we need to understand our capacity, which I didn't get a chance to say this morning, but we should be at our capacity. We should be enrolling freshmen, more freshmen, so that we don't have to supplement with transfer students down the road. And we also have to be cognizant of what we're charging for tuition. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists, and good discussion. We learned something from that, and there has been no order to continue it. So I see no motion on the table, so that's going to be good. So at this time, my agenda calls for a 15-minute recess. So let's go ahead and take that recess, and we'll be back at 3:13. About a minute.
Hang that gavel.
Fiscal year 2020 annual capital improvement budget. And the presenters are here. We've got a couple of regents that aren't yet, but they will be here shortly. And we are going to start off with President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Today, the administration presents for the board's review the University of Minnesota's FY 2020 annual capital improvement budget. Just to remind you, the annual capital budget is reflective of the planning priorities established by the 6-year capital improvement plan approved by the Board of Regents annually. In addition, funding pools categorized as repair and replacement, R&R, or higher education asset preservation and replacement, HEAPR, include projects intended to preserve and renew existing campus facilities and infrastructure. This capital budget includes the university's full state capital request, and since we're not certain we will get that, it will be updated in June to reflect the outcome of the 2019 legislative session. I want to take this opportunity to urge the university's advocates to continue to make the case for our full legislative request. Taking care of our infrastructure isn't just about buildings, it's about providing a world-class educational experience and a research enterprise. With that, with your permission, Chair Anderson, I will hand it over to Brian Burnett, our Senior Vice President, and Mike Bertelson, the Vice President for University Services, for presentation.
Okay, in just a moment, I just was going to point out that this is just for review today. So we're going to be reviewing this today. So Vice President Burnett, are you next?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, in May and June, the board reviews and approves the university's annual capital improvement budget for the next fiscal year. This presentation today covers the projects we will be undertaking in the coming year, and the 6-year capital improvement plan serves as the foundation for our major capital investments. We will revisit this capital plan in the fall when it has been updated and brought to you for review and action. The annual budget represents year 1 of the 6-year plan, and it includes projects greater than $1 million, as well as approvals for pools of R&R, or repair and replacement. Those are funds that come out of our operating budget to fix up our buildings, and HEAPR projects that fund many projects across the campuses in the system. The annual capital budget authorizes major projects to move into the design and construction this coming fiscal year, and anything appearing on this list must have a completed pre-design and be fully funded in order to be included on the list. And with that, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Vice President Bertelson.
Vice President Bertelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This slide gives a breakdown of the broad categories in our capital budget. As you can see, we rely on the state for about 62% of our capital funding. One major point, as the President mentioned, is the docket material in front of you today includes the entire 100% of our state capital request, which we continue to be hopeful for. And if any changes to that, we will adjust when we bring you back the budget in June for approval. And we continue to be hopeful these last days of the session. Specifically, the things in that capital request are on the slide, the $200 million for HEAPR, child development replacement, and A.B. Anderson capital renewal in Duluth. The state request represents 65% of our total 2020 capital budget. This slide I show every year just to remind us how critical it is that we find money and continue to our efforts for capital renewal. Facility renewal is a recurring, consistent, and a predictable problem. Our buildings age, systems wear out, and routine reinvestment is important to maximize our investment in the buildings that we own and operate. But this chart shows us that we rely largely on unpredictable sources of funding to meet that, namely HEAPR and state capital requests. The two gray lines represent renewal targets, the lower, sort of the minimum amount not to lose ground, and the upper gray line to succeed that would mean me making progress on our $4.5 billion capital renewal backlog. Annual stewardship, the maroon bars represent HEAPR and R&R. Annual reinvestment, standalone projects represent other facility renewal and internally funded projects. Some folks might look at our state capital request and think, well, that's a very big number. That size of request is very large. But this chart shows us that we're right. We really need 100% of that really almost every single year to catch up and be where we need to be. HEAPR projects, his role is maintaining the safety and functionality of our campuses. The university takes its stewardship very seriously and is here to make sure we have safe, modern, and functional facilities. HEAPR and R&R, repair and replacement, fund critical roles to make sure that faculty, staff, and students have the facilities that are necessary to do their work on a daily basis. HEAPR is the largest single source of funding available to make what often some may seem mundane but are vital capital improvements to keep our buildings and infrastructure running. The tagline, which we appreciate from Mrs. Kaler, HEAPR is cheaper is true indeed, is almost always more cost effective to reinvest in buildings that we already have than to build a new one. A new building is nice, but it adds to our operating costs and does not make the problems of our existing buildings go away. HEAPR projects, the $200 million request would fund over 175 separate projects. We have a detailed list of how we would meet all of that, and in the end, we adjust our list and priorities based upon whatever that dollar amount is. The smaller that is, whatever is actually funded will probably then require us to kick out some of the larger projects, like completing the mechanical engineering phase 3 project on the Twin Cities campus. So in addition to pools that we talked about, we'll talk about in a minute, there are really just a few line item projects, really big projects. Two of them in the middle, child development and A.B. Anderson, are part of the state request. The other two are standalone and university funded, so I want to talk about those for a moment. On the Duluth campus, there's a proposal to add new housing and to do an expansion of the dining facility. The residence hall new building would provide approximately 350 beds for first-year students, and the dining facility would accommodate 300 additional seats to serve the UMD residential population and the campus community. The second line item is a health sciences library in Wagenstein stack relocation. This is part of our reassignment and replacement of things within the health sciences and where they belong, and it ties to the health science education project and our goal to empty the library from the Deal Hall. And that this means we're putting some pieces in the basement of the PWB and closer to the biomedical library in the new Health Science Education Center. In addition to that, the capital budget includes a number of R&R pools. These are funds used to tackle many projects such as elevator upgrades, parking lot resurfacing, LED lighting, and so forth. We have, and these, as Senior Vice President Burnett mentioned, come out of the annual operating budget plans of each of these businesses. Many of these come out of utilities and auxiliaries. In fact, the vast majority are in those categories. Finally, I'd like to make a note of a number of projects that you see that are potential to come to you either in June or throughout the next fiscal year. These are projects that we've been working hard on and either in feasibility or trying in pre-design, but are not yet far enough along in the process that we feel confident in the final program or the cost estimates to put them in front of you. But we do want you to know that these are the set of projects that are high in mind and relatively in some stage along in process, and we want to identify those. One particular thing is in your docket on slide on page 228, you will see this same page, but without a revised on the topic on the top of the page, but at the end of your docket on page 233, you will see a revised slide that adds a line for Shriners Hospital. And I think President Kaler wants to comment on that.
President Kaler?
Chair Anderson, thank you. Yes, this is a new item and it deserves a little bit of introduction discussion. This refers to the physical facility on East River Road in Minneapolis, right before you go under the railroad bridge if you are headed south. It's a small campus, currently owned by the Shriners, and it was used as a children's pediatric hospital, as befits the Shriners' commitment to children's health. They've decided to close that facility, and the building in parking garage and associated small hotel are on the real estate market. In parallel, there's an emerging opportunity that shows great potential in a collaboration between the medical school and the College of Education and Human Development around autism. And you heard one of our newly tenured faculty members speak today about his work on autism. This initiative, which I endorse very strongly, I think provides an opportunity for us to make an important statement about a critical public health issue for the people of Minnesota. It aligns broadly with the neuroscience initiative in the medical school, but does stand alone. It's coming together quickly, and I'm quite optimistic with pending faculty hires and the existing expertise that we have, that we can put together a program around the treatment of autism that will be best in class. So those are moving in parallel, and the intersection, I think, is quite interesting. The acquisition of this hospital campus would provide a great opportunity for us to have a place with some inpatient or resident capacity for families as well as children. It's easy to get to, quieter, a nice environment to carry out this research project. So we've placed this on the list, but again, as Mike said, these are ideas and opportunities that we have not fully fleshed out. We do fully understand that this operation and facility would need to be funded philanthropically, and we have very high belief that we have donors who will be interested at the appropriate level to enable this to go forward. It's timely now because the building, as I mentioned, is on the real estate market. Bids were due on this May 1st, and we have begun a conversation with a private third party, there we go, sorry, to work together and develop this potential. We've made no commitment of anything yet, and of course, as we move forward and flesh this out, we'll bring it to the board for the appropriate approvals. But that's what Shriners Hospital on this list is about.
Thank you, President Kaler. Is the presentation done?
Two more slides.
Do you want to go to this question, or do you want to wait till the presentation's done?
I can wait. I was just going to ask a clarifying question.
Well, go ahead, Regent Paul.
I just want to maybe recapitulate. So the Shriners opportunity offers us the opportunity to consolidate various academic initiatives around autism in one building, as well as providing a patient and outpatient resources for families in Minnesota, sort of all in one place. It becomes an academic autism center, if you will. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Regent Bertelson, Regent Bertelson, you just got it.
What happened?
Congratulations.
There's some empty chairs, I do know that, but I don't think I'm going to jump in on
Senior
that
Vice
one.
President Bertelson, go ahead.
Actually, the next two slides are Senior Vice President Burnett.
Yes, I've got this slide. If you'll flip it. So this slide provides a summary of the funding sources for the projects included in the annual capital improvement budget. A reminder, this includes the full value of our 2019 capital request, which is still for discussion down the street in St. Paul. Just quickly, you know, the state debt is hopefully the big one there is the HEPR piece and the piece of the other two projects. University debt would be used for some of these projects as well, most notably the dining and housing at Duluth is the big piece of that. And we would have the capacity to issue that debt as we put that plan together. The debt components of this proposed budget include financing for our share of the projects in the state capital request. And as I just said here, just off by a slide, the UMD piece would be about $58 million in debt that they would pay back over time from housing and dining revenues. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to take any questions about this preliminary capital budget that's just reviewed today.
That last slide, just to refresh my memory, we as a university pay off about 80 to 90 million a year in debt. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we amortize between 80 and 90 million. I think this year we're paying off about 95 million of principal. So we've had a pretty aggressive debt schedule for a couple of decades.
I just like to put in
Yeah.
perspective what we're asking.
Sure.
Yeah, so
It
that's-
wouldn't really change the needle on how much outstanding debt the university has with these projects.
Okay, so we've had the presentation. Again, it's just for review. We've got other things to do today, but anybody want to ask questions of any of our presenters about this? Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Just a question on the HEAPR project, which we've talked a lot about the rationale for the work in the past and how important it is. So this question has to do with sort of do those projects differ from, our other capital projects in the percentage of labor that's involved, or are they really all pretty much the same? I could imagine that HEAPR, which is renovation, is a much more higher labor content capital project, but I may be wrong. And I'm just curious about the mix there.
Mr. Chair, Regent Powell, I've never been asked that, and so I don't have, I'll just have intuition, but my intuition would be the same as yours. In a new project, new building, you would have much more site, a lot more materials. A renovation, just by its nature, you're going to be spending more time of people. So I think that, in general, I think that my intuition would say you're right, but I don't have any facts to back it up.
It'd be helpful to have some, because I think that actually, labor intensity, it makes them, I think, even more attractive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Powell. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bertelsen, for the presentation. I support the capital request. The Murphy property is on there, and I won't go into detail on it, but other than, and you can decide if you want to talk about that, but do you expect we're going to be hearing more about the future plans and your recommendations, or are you, or is that passed at this point, or what generally can you talk about with that?
Mr. Chair, Regent Beeson. So yes, we have sort of a two-track possibilities as we think about Murphy. What's in here is a possibility, because we know that as the facility has some severe deficiencies, specifically around fire safety issues. We are doing analysis about the future and whether that we had certain assumptions when we initially acquired Murphy, which haven't turned out to be the case. What we thought this purpose was, and we think there's some new opportunities because of the tax law that might make it a better private sector opportunity than a university one. So we have that on there in case we would need to make those kind of investments in anticipation of a possible property transaction. But you will hear more about that coming soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Bertelsen. Any other questions on the capital budget? Thank you. If not, we are going to move on to our next item, which is again a review action. It's about the Duluth campus, and it's a real estate transaction. And I think, is Vice President Kruger going to be talking to us about that?
She is.
She's going to be up here for a while.
Okay.
This is just review.
The first one's review, and then we've got the Minneapolis campus one. Okay. So you grab a chair and get comfortable.
Settled in.
And whenever you're ready, you can lead us into the what we're thinking about doing up in Duluth.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. Our first item that I'm here to talk to you about today is for review, and we are reviewing a proposed land exchange in Duluth that would swap 2 university-owned properties for 2 parcels owned by Gold Properties LLC. And if you look on the map here, the Gold properties are noted in blue hash marks, and the university properties are these 2 in maroon. The potential land exchange has been discussed with the Gold Properties LLC and UMD senior leadership for a number of years before arriving at the agreed-upon transaction that is before you today. The Gold properties that the university intends to acquire, the result of this transaction, are contiguous to other university properties. I think you can see those. They're not showing up on my point. I apologize. I'm pointing and you don't actually see anything. But what you see in gold here next to the blue hash marks, these are parking facilities owned by UMD, and this would allow for an extension of that parking facility. The properties in question that Gold Properties owned are at 511 West St. Marie Street and 515 West St. Marie Street in the city of Duluth. They consist of older housing structures on both parcels that are currently serve as student rental properties. The university's properties are at 407 West St. Marie Street and 419 Gold Street. And the parcel on 407 is vacant land, and the parcel on 419 Gold Street is used for surface parking by UMD. Gold Properties will complete the demolition of the housing structures and transfer the vacant land to the university. In exchange, the university will transfer its properties upon closing to Gold Properties, scheduled on or before June 28, 2019. Closing after the end of the academic year allows for the expiration of the current residential leases. In addition, the sum of $307,600 will be paid by the university to Gold Properties at close. This amounts to the differences in the appraised values between the properties, the Gold properties being more valuable because of the income that is being generated currently by the student rentals. It also includes some compensation for that demolition. And with that concludes the review of this land exchange at UMD.
So my question is, did you talk about a closing date in late June?
Correct.
So my assumption is that we will review this today, ask questions, we'll come back to the June meeting for action.
For action, yes.
Okay. Any questions on this from anybody? Okay, I think that's going to answer. Before we go to the next item, I mentioned it earlier at the beginning of this meeting that 4 of our former colleagues are not here, and 4 of our new colleagues are not here. And I just want to make sure, and Jason, I want you to tell me, this next item and the next couple we are going to be voting on, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do we have a quorum?
We do not currently, but I believe Regent Chu is just, so I will go retrieve Regent Chu, but you can discuss it.
We maybe need to retrieve Regent Chu. Whatever he's doing, could you tell him we might actually need him? Okay, we'll start with the review and we'll get Regent Chu here. Go ahead, if you will, please.
Thank you. This next transaction, we are asking for review and action at this month's meeting. And this is for the purchase of properties on Erie Street Southeast in Minneapolis. The subject properties consist of 13 separate parcels totaling 72,500 square feet or 1.66 acres on the east side of Erie Street, south of Fulton Southeast. On the map, these are in the blue and green colors on the east side of Erie Street. The university owns property directly to the east of the site, purchased in 2017, as well as across the street to the north, the contract parking lot, as well as to the northwest, our current clinics and surgery center. As you may recall from last fall's discussion in the 6-year capital plan, the university intends to construct a future clinical research facility on Block 11. That property is between Frontier Hall and the current clinics and surgery center on the map. Although we could construct this facility on the parcel we currently own, which is the parking lot on the southern portion of that block, it would be beneficial to acquire the additional properties on the northern side of Block 11 in order to enhance the site for construction. The university intends to use the property on Erie Street for the potential relocation of properties from Block 11 in order to assemble this larger site for the future clinical research facility. If those relocations do not come to fruition, the properties on Erie Street will serve as for land banking purposes. The current properties on Erie Street are a mix of single-family duplex and triplexes. They're an older housing stock, and most are rentals, but there are a couple of homesteaded properties on this block. The total purchase price for the subject properties will be approximately $11.9 million. The university had 2 separate appraisals conducted for these properties, and the purchase agreements fall within the appraised values for the properties. The transaction will involve 4 separate purchase agreements. I would like to point out that one of the individual properties is not yet under contract, but negotiations are hopefully nearing completion, and we believe that we will be able to complete the transaction. Generally, we would not bring such a transaction forward to you until we have all properties under contract. Generally, those contracts then stipulate subject to Board of Regents approval, similar to in the case of that gold properties that we just reviewed. All of those purchase agreements say subject to Board of Regents approval. In this case, we are asking for this review and action today in order to move ahead as quickly as possible, assuming the successful completion of these negotiations with the final property. As noted on the previous slide, many of these properties are rental properties, and we want to be able to ensure that these property owners do not rent those properties for the upcoming school year. And that is why we're asking for that review and action today, to give those property owners some certainty and be able to move as quickly as possible. At the time of closing, the university intends to enter into a month-to-month ground lease for the properties with Erie Street Properties LLC in order to have the properties operated and maintained until the current rental leases expire and we are able to execute either the land swap or demolition of the properties. And with that, that concludes this presentation.
Okay.
It's a rather complex one.
It's not that complex, but I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It's a
So
lot
we
of
have
money.
to know what we're doing here. Any of my colleagues have questions? Regent Hsu.
I just have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm all for land banking because the property is just going up in value. So if we get it now, the value is probably going to continue rising, and we can always sell it if we need to.
Okay. Any other comments? Regent Rosha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In following that, I think this sets the board and future members up for a success by having these resources. This is what land goes for on Nurse Strand, I understand. But it's what the one thing that I always have a difficult time in, and I guess it comes down to how much granularity we want in the information, is just to understand what the market would say about this land. And if we were to say, well, that's a little rich, we want to come in 10% below that, does that mean some private sector or other purchaser swoops in and grabs that? If you could just mention just a little bit, because this is a lot of money.
It is.
And if you could just maybe talk a little bit about sort of how we get to this point, because we keep seeing this in successive transactions growing more and more. And I just want to feel good if somebody were to ask me on the street, well, why did you spend $8 million an acre or whatever the heck it is? How can you justify that? Could you just talk a little bit about what the market is and what would happen if we weren't doing this, and just a little bit of that methodology?
Vice President Kruger.
This area of the market, as you know, is very hot. One of the things that we do per our administrative policy is that whenever we're purchasing or selling properties, we do go out and get appraisals for the properties. And these are independent MAI appraisals that we conduct and contract for. In this case, there were 2 separate appraisals, and the values of our purchases are consistent with and slightly below what those appraisals came in at. The appraisals then are done and compare the market and are reflective of the current market conditions. There are other properties in the area that are going for more. There are some that are going for less, and that is dependent upon the very specifics of the market conditions in this particular area. And what the appraisals do is they look at both the land value as well as they look at if it's an income property, they will assess they'll appraise the property based upon the income. So in the previous case with the gold properties, our properties, even though they were right next door or down the block, they were worth less because we were not generating as much income as those student rentals. So in that case, the income was a higher value than the land value. In these cases, the land value is higher than the income value of the rental properties. So they look at and they give us the appraisals based on both of those.
Correct. They do the appraisals based on income-based or land-based.
Yep.
Regent Roche,
Thank you,
follow
Chair. If
up.
I could just ask a real quick. Not suggesting that this is, a device that we would consider, but were the university to exercise its condemnation power, is this the price we'd likely be compelled to pay?
It is likely that Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, I apologize for
That's fine.
skipping my Roberts rules. This is likely the price that we would be paying.
Thank you.
I have a question before. We got a couple other people. I just have a quick question, and maybe Senior Vice President Burnett's the one. Where is the money coming from in our university portfolio to purchase these properties?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Vice President Kruger can jump in as well. We have a real estate account that we can purchase property from. We also can use our commercial paper facility that the board approved. That's a very good use because it's low cost to take that out in that regard. I don't believe we have 11 million sitting around, so I think we're going to be using some of the commercial paper facility.
And my concern on that is, I think I agree with Regent Hsu that land banking and any property we can get around here, if we can pay for it, is great. But I don't want tuition to go up because we, do that. I think we should get money from somewhere else, and we have the commercial paper. I forgot about that. Regent Beeson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think history would say that if we hadn't acted on this, that the private sector would have paid a premium. And the way they justify that is and you're starting to see this, buildings are now starting to go up more than 10 stories high, or across the street, 25 stories high. So they will take the risks, but they will either build them so that they can get more in rents, or they're going to get more units. But it is, I think this is strategic for the reasons that Regent Hsu said. I would not be against using eminent domain at some point, because there are recalcitrant owners who are sitting, in strategic spots. And I think our autonomy comes into play in using that tool in ways that cities can't. I think there are some things that we might explore down the line. I don't think that's necessary right now, though.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Regent Powell.
Regent Beeson answered the question I was going to ask, so I'll pass.
Can I just
Senior Vice President Burnett.
Just for the members, it is a phenomenon around the major research universities about land values, and you just go north on 4th Street, north of the renovation going on at the public library. I don't know if you've noticed, this week that whole block has been torn down, and investors have taken that whole block down. So even to our west, we're watching major investment coming from the private sector. And what I see and hear from my counterparts is investors are betting that 50 to 100 years from now, these major research universities are going to be in place and generating income for their real estate bets. And so this is not just a Minneapolis phenomenon. This is a phenomenon in other parts of this country.
Well, I apologize that we had the discussion before we had a motion on the table. But, Regent Hsu, if you want to ask the discussion, then we'll get a motion put on.
Well, I'll wait for the motion.
Okay. What I'm looking for then is a motion to recommend the purchase of these properties.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Regent Hsu, you may now speak to the motion.
Thank you. I just want to add that my congratulations to the staff who were able to put this deal together, because it's often not that easy to get a deal like this, and the price is reasonable, I think, based on the appraisals. And unfortunately, that one little sliver isn't part of this yet, but I would say that this is a great opportunity for us.
Okay. Anybody else speak to the motion? At this time, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the purchase of land at the address noted on Erie Street Southeast, Minneapolis, in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we're now going to move on to the resolution related to the organization of an address, which I believe that's University Village.
That is
And it
correct.
looks like Assistant Vice President Kruger is going to continue to stay there. I'm glad you're comfortable. And you're going to have Senior Associate Counsel Samzal? Wow, okay, I'm lucky today. When you two are ready, again, I'll just point out that this is for review and action. Again, don't necessarily like to have review and action, but if we can get to a consensus, we can take the action.
Thank you, Chair Anderson.
And when you're ready, just go ahead.
Doesn't like this one. There we go.
There we go, Jeff. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. We are here today to ask for the Regents' review and action on the operating agreement for the 2515 University Avenue Southeast LLC, which was established for the purchase of University Village, as you noted. As you noted, I'm joined by Senior Associate General Counsel Beth Zamzo. We are asking for review and action today, but we do recognize that the Regents may have additional discussion on this item, and we have a very specific then request if you do choose to delay this action until June that we can speak to further. As you will recall, the Regents have taken action on both the establishment of the LLC and the specifics of the real estate transaction over this past year, and we did close without incident on March 29th, 2019. The operating agreement can be found on page 254 of your docket. The operating agreement details the powers granted to the 2515 LLC to transact business. It establishes a management committee to manage and direct the company's general businesses and affairs, and reserves to the Regents the sole authority to approve certain activities and transactions. The operating agreement will improve the operational efficiency of the 2515 LLC, which consistent with the board's oversight and fiduciary duties. The key components of the operating agreement include the purpose of the LLC, the authority of the Regents, the role of the management committee, the role of the LLC officers, provisions related to allocations and distributions, liquidation and termination, and records and accounting. The sole activity of the company is to engage in the business of owning and operating and maintaining the 2515 University Avenue Southeast. It's very clear in the operating agreement that that's what this is about. The operating agreement specifies the authorities and responsibilities of the Regents, the LLC's management committee, and the LLC's officers. The primary oversight of the 2515 LLC rests with the Regents as the sole member, and the general business affairs of the company are to be managed by the management committee or the officers as delegated by the operating agreement. The LLC is required under the operating agreement to report annually to the Board of Regents in its financial results and of operations, the financial position of the company, planned operating and capital budgets, and any other information that's reasonably necessary to inform the board of our financial position. The management committee is the second tier of governance and supervision provided under the operating agreement. The management committee is authorized to manage and direct the company subject to the board authority. And the officers are that third tier of governance and day-to-day supervision. The president of the 2515 LLC will have the active supervision, management, direction, and control of the business affairs of the LLC under the supervision of that management committee and ultimately the Board of Regents.
The operating agreement reserves to the member, which is effectively the Board of Regents or the governing body of the Board of Regents, to approve certain acts. There are 15 reserved acts, merge or consolidate the LLC to file a petition regarding bankruptcy or insolvency, to lend or borrow money, to guarantee any loan or indebtedness, to enter the LLC into any partnership or joint venture, to amend, alter, or repeal the operating agreement, to acquire any business, to effect a dissolution, liquidation, or termination of the LLC, to sell all or substantially all of the LLC's assets, to buy, sell, or trade securities, to employ one or more individuals, to purchase goods or services in an amount over $1 million, to acquire or sell real property, to enter into any lease with any new commercial or retail tenant that may negatively impact the property tax exemption, or kind of a blanket to do any other act which is inconsistent with the terms of the operating agreement, or which it would make it impossible to carry on the ordinary business of the company.
And so with that, we are asking for the Regents to review and approve the resolution that can be found on page 253 of your docket materials.
With that, I'm going to ask for a motion. Is there a motion to recommend the resolution related to organization of the property stated? So it's been moved and seconded. With that, we've got a motion on the floor. Is there discussion about this motion? Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple little clarifications. It appears to me when I went through the reserved authorities that it really, it reflects the application of the same limitations on transactions and on real estate. In fact, it's even more restrictive of real estate because it's all real estate, not just that which falls below the threshold, meaning that it would have to come back to the board before that would have to happen. So I don't feel like that's an issue. The slide that came through, and maybe I just wasn't tracking closely enough, but I believe it mentioned that amendments to the agreement require board approval, but under the miscellaneous section, it provides that the agreement may be amended through a writing approved by the university president, obviously notwithstanding the reservations. So was that overstated in the slide, or did I misread it?
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, it is overstated in the slide. My apologies. The intention is that the Board of Regents would be required to amend the operating agreement as it related to the member reserved authorities, or then there's that blanket provision that's really dealing with, or anything else that dramatically changes the intent of the operating agreement.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, if I can follow. And then the other question was with relation to insurance. And we have our own insurance. The document provides that the LLC may, it's permissive. What do we anticipate the insurance circumstance be? Will it be under the university's self-insurance provisions, or are we expecting the LLC to be acquiring a separate form of insurance?
Ms. Kruger, do you have that answer?
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, we have worked with our Office of Risk Management, and it is going to be covered under the university's insurance. And so we will be paying the university rates, the LLC will be paying the university's rates related to the insurance pool.
Regent Rocha, you want to continue to talk?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll say just I'm trying to conceptualize. I'm sure it's worked out, but yes. I was just interested in whether if we do the LLC structure, which we've talked about in the past as, is it necessary? And if it is something that actually could be a benefit to us, and particularly as it relates to different financing options and so on, I just want to understand, does it create an additional expense because you've got a separate insurance obligation? But if our program allows us to do it, it's kind of an offline question. But
I would just, from my business point of view, from whatever it's worth, I would look at it as that we're going to increase premiums in our risk pool, and for whatever risk it has, it would be the same as a general insurance company. So if we have our risk correctly priced, it would be proper. I see one of our bean counters is stepping up to the table there. So Mr. Volna, maybe you want to explain that to us.
Chair Anderson, Regent Rocha, to answer your question, so what we will do is simply endorse this new facility under all of the applicable insurance policies that we currently have. They will be rated and will be included in the premiums that we pay. Then we'll just allocate those costs back to the LLC to pay as a part of our normal annual insurance allocation process.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And there was, I think, Regent Powell was next.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. And just another quick one following along the same line of questioning. So we'll receive annually audited financial statements of the operation.
That's correct.
Chair
Who will do?
Anderson.
Will it be internally audited or a third party, or how will that work?
Does somebody out there have that answer?
Chair Anderson, Regent Powell, we haven't decided yet if we actually want to spend the money to have a separate set of audited statements for this entity. As we discussed earlier today in the audit committee, there is a fair amount of standalone cost just with having this done. It will be included as part of the overall scope of the regular audit, and we could, if we choose, have them do some agreed upon procedures on things that we really care about. But in terms of it being a part of the university's audit, it will be covered by that.
And just a quick follow-on. Roughly, the annual turnover is going to be what, 5 or 6 million? Does anyone remember?
Remember what the annual revenue projections are?
About 3.
I think it was between, my recollection is between $2 and $3 million. President Kaler, you maybe have that answer?
Chairman Anderson, I'm almost certain it's 2.8 million a year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. As everyone knows, I'm a little uncomfortable with this whole setup, but I do want to point out that there is a typo on 6.7, and line 3, I think it says pre-form. I think it should be perform services for the company. But that wasn't my point. I just kind of saw that. I'm generally uncomfortable with this because I don't really understand why we're setting it up this way. It's never really been clearly explained to me, and I hope that this isn't kind of a precedent for how we're going to do things in the future. I think we are setting up kind of layers and layers of administration and things that probably aren't necessary for this entity. But I guess I don't know. I'll know in the future whether or not this is a good idea. But right now, I'm not convinced that it is. So,
does anybody want to take a stab at answering that for Regent Hsu? Okay. Regent Rocha.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say that when I see if that is not intended to be preform, it gives me comfort to know that this wasn't just bought off of LegalZoom.com. That they actually crafted this. As you know, Regent Hsu, I've had some of the same concerns, and whether it was premature to create an entity and so on. I bear some optimism that this may provide an opportunity to sort of look at more of a modular approach to the various properties and not just everything getting lumped together. And sometimes I think it may actually give us an opportunity to look at it a little bit differently. And so the reservations that I had have, I think, that issue has sort of resolved itself with some of the other dynamics. But I appreciate your caution, and we'll, I'm sure, understand in time as to whether this is a new way of doing things or if this is a one-off opportunity. So I'm comfortable with it. Thank you.
From my point, in sitting as the chair of this committee, I'll tell you, we just approved a land bank authorization where we're going to spend $11 million and really have no revenue coming in for the foreseeable future. As with this one, we're going to finance it with our own money, pay the interest rate from the renters, and come out with President Kaler's telling me about $2.8 million at the end of the year. I think if it all works, it's a great idea. I mean, time will tell. Like you say, Regent Hsu, time will tell.
I'm not saying it's a bad deal. I'm saying the structure that we've set up, I think, is unnecessary, and I'll just leave it at that.
So anyway, I'll quit talking before I dig a deeper hole. And I guess I will call for the question, if that's the case. All those in favor of the resolution related to the organization of what I call University Village, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Members of the committee.
I hope you didn't get too comfortable because we're going to ask you to leave now. And we are going to go to the consent report. Again, always the consent report's always review and action. It's always just action basically, but we can review it. I'm going to read what I have just so I don't leave anything out while they're setting up. And I will start by saying the consent report includes the Central Reserve's general contingency, purchase of goods and services of $1 million and over, the appointment of an employment agreement for the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts on the Duluth campus, a new employment agreement for the Twin Cities campus men's head basketball coach, 3 East Cliff improvement projects that have been recommended by the East Cliff Advisory Board and the East Cliff Technical Advisory Committee. Before I ask for a motion, I do want to know if any of the committee members would like to separate out any of these questions. If not, I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of the consent report. Is there a motion to recommend approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on any of the items? Yes, Regent Shu.
I will make a comment on the Patino contract. I would just say that, and I say this every time because I think the incentives should be bigger for these types of things like winning Big Ten championships and NCAA tournament qualification, all that kind of stuff. But these are negotiated by our athletic director and president and the coach and his agent. And I just would like to see more incentives in the future, but I don't know.
Point well taken. Thank you. Well taken. Thank you, Regent Shu. Any other discussion? Regent Paul.
Quick question, clarification. Our academic performance bonuses, those are routinely included in coach contracts?
President Kaler, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. Chair Anderson, Regent Pell, yeah, they're a standard boilerplate component of most coaches' contracts.
Any other discussion on the consent report? If not, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor of the consent report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent report passes. A lot of times we have ran out of time at the time for information items, but that is not the case today. So I'm going to ask Senior Vice President Burnett if there's anything you want to tell us about the information items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Just briefly, there's a number of reports in your docket, including investment performance, investment advisory committee that just met this week. I would maybe call your attention to an update that we gave you a summary of our bond offering that we did in New York here a few weeks ago. It was very successful, and the credit worthiness and the credit of this institution is very strong in the market, and we had very low interest rates, and we're the beneficiary of that, and that means our debt costs less money. So a lot of great work by finance staff and our consultants to help us have a successful bond issuance. We did not use the entire authority that the board authorized us. We issued only what we needed, and I think that's the right approach with the commercial paper facility bringing in lower cost variable rate debt. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions from the information items.
I will say on that note, and I think it's in the finance docket, or it might be in tomorrow's docket. I think the end has a Standard & Poor's report on University of Minnesota. Very interesting to read about what some people with neutral eyes think about the University of Minnesota. Very interesting report. Is there any other items of business we need to take care of? Regent Beeson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also comment about those rating reports. They are not unimportant. In an industry that's under a lot of siege and with many of our peers in real serious financial trouble, to get that sort of a report where we check almost every box of financial health is a testament to the administration and the staff now and in the past that have given us this really strong university to work on going forward.
Thank you very much. Do I have anyone to move for adjournment?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.